Hi everyone, it's Vela from Online Combat Battalion with another Arma 3 Eden tutorial for you. This one's a little more detailed than others. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to use the enemy occupation script by Bangabob, which handles your AI enemy, or you can use friendly troops, to spawn in zones and then to despawn when you leave the zones. Now this tutorial is a little bit more detailed than my normal videos. I hope it makes sense, and let's get started. The first thing you're going to need is the enemy occupation system by Bangabob. It's on the Bohemia Interactive forums, and I'll put the link in the description below. And what you're looking for is the download 1.98. Don't worry about the Armaholic link, because Armaholic is now gone. So the download 1.98 is what you want. We download the script, and then once we've got it, I'll show you where to put it and how to use it. So grab that first, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now you have downloaded the enemy occupation script, or EOS. Just extract it onto your desktop and leave it there for now. What we need to do is jump into the editor, and you can use this with any map or any set of mods. I'm using the SOG Prairie Fire DLC stuff at the moment, so this is an unsung map, and these are SOG units. So just place one playable unit, and then go to Scenario, Save As, and you'll see down here you've got either missions or MP missions. Now, because I make only multiplayer missions or co-op missions, I only use the MP missions folder, and within that folder I've got other folders as well. So this is a Vietnam mission, so I'm going to save it into this folder because they're the mods I'm using. And you can, down here, file name, put in there whatever you want, and then click save. I've already saved this one as EOS demo, and you'll see that it's there. Okay, so we've saved that. Now what we need to do is go and find where that folder is and place the EOS folder into that. So let's go through. Okay, so we've saved our mission into MP missions. To find that, you need to go to your computer name, Documents, Arma 3 Other Profiles, and you'll see your Arma 3 playing name in there. Double click on that, and remember I saved it to MP missions, and that's MP missions there. And you'll remember I saved it to a folder called Vietnam missions, and there we have EOS demo. And you won't already have the EOS folder in there. You need to grab that off the desktop and just drop it into your mission folder. After you've saved it, you'll see mission.sqm. We don't need to worry about that file. It's required, but we don't need to edit it for EOS to work. So we've got our EOS folder in there now. There is another file that we need in there for EOS to work. So go right click, go to New Text Document, and we're going to call this Init.sqf, which is INIT.sqf. It'll ask you if you want to change the extension, just say yes. Let's open the Init.sqf, and we need to type in here open bracket, close bracket, which in this editor already puts it there, EXEC capital V for Victor, capital M for Mike, inverted commas, EOS backslash OpenMe.sqf, close brackets, semicolon, and hit save. Okay. That will call and execute that script when the mission loads. So let's go back to our folder here, and we have the EOS folder. just double click to open that, and there's two files here that we really want to be looking at to make EOS work for us. The first one is unit pools. Now if you haven't scripted before, you haven't never used them, you've never played with them or edited them, don't panic. This is not as difficult as it looks. Unit pools is basically where we have all the class names of the units that we want to have spawn. Now when you open your EOS folder, it won't look exactly listed like this. It will look more like this. And what I've done is simply move them down onto separate lines just so it's easier for me to see what class names I have, and to enter new class names in there without having to go along the line like this. If you want it set out like this, you simply find, for example, we've got the motor pool here or the mot pool, and you'll see after B truck 01 covered F, inverted comma, then comma, press enter, then the next line after the comma, enter, next line after the comma, enter, and you can also go just here before these brackets and press enter, and you can tab them across to make it easier to reference, and you'll see the last bracket here. We can also click just before that and press enter, and there we just have our class names on 4 separate lines. It's just easier to lay that out. So the unit pools file is where we list the units that we want to use in our script. Now if you've never before obtained the class names of units in Arma, it's actually quite easy to do. This guy here, for example, if I want to get the class name of this unit, left click once, right click, go down to log, across to log classes to clipboard, and then we can go into our faction. Let's have a look. We've got our West NATO faction, or you can call that whatever you like. I'm going to call it the SOG faction. Doesn't matter what you call it because it's not referenced by the script because it has 2 forward slashes before it, so it's commented out. Now all I do is go in between those inverted commas, paste, and now that's the class name for that troop entered, and they will spawn as part of faction 1. Now I'll just undo that because I don't want to actually change that. But you'll see that we have, I have the first faction is North Vietnamese Army, which is faction 0. And then I have the class names for a bunch of NVA guys, which are pretty much exactly the same except for the numbers at the end. Okay, so that is faction 0 is North Vietnamese Army. Faction 1 is, it's actually, I'll put independent faction. So the independent faction is faction 1. Then I've got another independent faction down here, which is 2 that I don't need to really use. Then you'll have civilian faction 3. Now again, to make this easier for you, you can simply go and remember after the bracket, then after the comma, and all the way down after the comma, put all of these class names onto separate lines just to make it easier for you to reference. That's what I do. Okay, so each of these in the unit pools, the first one will be inf pool, which is the infantry that you're going to spawn as part of the civilian faction 3. The mot pool is transport vehicles. ACH is attack helicopters, and we've got transport helicopters, UAVs, static weapons, ships or boats, drivers, which will be for your transport vehicles, crew, which will be for your armored vehicles, then heli crew, which will be for your helicopters. Now because that faction there is civilian, there's nothing entered there. Whereas if I have a look at the NVA faction, we have a motor pool, we have a couple of vehicles there, a couple of different vehicle class names that can spawn. And again, getting the class name for a vehicle is exactly the same as getting a class name for anything else. You place the vehicle, ensure it's selected by left clicking on it once. So it's got this nice little box around it. Right click, log classes to clipboard, and now it's logged the class name of that vehicle. Okay. So back to this file here, which is the unit pools. Now let's remember the North Vietnamese Army are faction 0. Okay, and our infantry pool has all of these class names in it. The other file that we need to have a look at is the OpenMe.sqf. Okay, now this might seem a bit confusing again, but it really isn't once you get the hang of it. So here I want you to have a look at example call EOS. Alright, so what we have here, again this won't look the same because it's all on long lines across. Again, I've gone behind the commas and I've just entered down to put them onto separate lines. So the first thing we've got here is, you'll see up here, for example, marker name, and then you can put another marker name. I only use one at a time, and then you'll have a series of numbers in brackets, and then a word, which will be the name of a faction, and then a EOS spawn call command. These groups of numbers refer to the numbers in these lines of code. Now I've got here Vietnamese AI spawn zones. I'm just going to take that line of code and put it here, so it's a little bit easier for us to reference while we're explaining things. So you'll see the first line here, which is normally sitting just behind this line here, says house groups, size of groups, probability. And the first one here after the null equals has 2 brackets on it, and it has a little number in there. Now you can change that to whatever you like, because that's the name of your marker that you're going to place on the map where you want these troops to spawn. In this instance, that marker name is Z_1. Okay, so that's the first. The second set of numbers refers to house groups, size of groups, and probability. So house groups, I've got 1, size of groups 1, and probability 100. Now if you have a look just up here, group sizes in this script are a little bit different. So if you say you want one group and the size of group to be 1, it's not actually 1. So 1, you'll see here, equals 2 to 4, 2 equals 4 to 8, 3 equals 8 to 12, and so on. So in this first part here where we've got house groups, size of groups, I've put 1, 1, so I will get between 2 and 4 troops spawn inside buildings that are nearby. Okay, the last figure there, probability, is the probability in a percentage number of whether they will spawn or not. So I've put them at 100, which means they will spawn. If I put that number to 50, for example, there's a 50% chance that they will spawn and a 50% chance that they won't. But I definitely want them, so I'm going to leave that at 100. The next series of numbers here in the brackets refers to patrol groups. Okay, again, reference the numbers up here for the sizes, but in patrol groups I've got 2, and I want each of those 2 patrol groups to have a size of 5, which is 16 to 20 troops. I might just reduce that to maybe 2, so I'll get 4 to 8 troops, and again, probability 100. Next line is light vehicles. I'm spawning 1 size group and 2 crew. I'll just change that to 1, and again, probability 100. The next one is your armored vehicles. Now I don't want any armored vehicles spawned in this mission by the enemy, so I'll put that at 0 and 0. The next one is static vehicles. I've selected group size for statics as 1 and 100%. The next one is helicopters. Now I've set that all as zeros because I don't want my enemy using helicopters in this mission. And now let's have a look at this last series of details here. Now that relates to, as we've been going along through these and to each one of these, this is the last series as you see there. Okay, so the first number is the faction. Now remember, our North Vietnamese Army faction here in the unit pools file is 0. So in the OpenMe, it is 0. So if we have a look here, faction relates to this number here, which is 0 for the North Vietnamese Army. Now the marker type, different types of markers do different things. If you set the marker type to 1, as I have, your players won't be able to see that spawn zone marker on the map, which is what I want. If you set that to 0, they will be able to see it and it will be faded red, but when you come close to it, it will become dark red. When it's cleared, it will become green. So the old insurgency style zone. If you set that marker to 3, I believe it does different things, but I've never used that. You can play around with it and see how it goes. The next detail we have here is the distance, which relates to this number here. Now for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to set that at 20. I normally set it between 2 and 300. Now this is the distance that your players are from that zone, or the distance they need to be for those troops to spawn in that zone. Okay, so when I'm 20 meters away from marker Z1, these units will spawn. The next is the faction descriptor. So the North Vietnamese Army are enemy or OP4 or East, as Arma refers to them, so I put East in there. If they were US or Australian troops, they would be West. If they were independent faction, you'd put the word independent in there. The next one it does relate to height limit, and I've put true. And what a height limit means is that if your infantry are close to the zone, it will spawn. If an aircraft flies over the top of the zone, the infantry won't spawn. If I change that to false, then the AI will spawn in that zone when an aircraft flies over them. Probably not ideal if you've got a lot of zones and you've got aircraft around, because a big part of this script is designed to reduce the AI load on your mission and your server to make performance much better. And the last one I just leave as false, because that's the debug. And you'll see call EOS spawn, which is the script call. So I'll just take that and put it back to where it was originally. And you'll see I have spawns set up for Vietnamese, Australian troops, independent troops, and I've got a whole bunch here that I'm not using at the moment. You can also have, if you wanted to, go back to our unit pools, you'll see that we have a civilian faction, which is faction 3. And I have entered the class names here for Vietnamese civilians to use in a Vietnam style mission. And you can do the same with those if you wanted to have, say for example, marker B1, and then you edit these as per the description we've just gone through to spawn civilian units with civilian vehicles, etc. Okay, I hope I have not confused you or lost you. Alright, so they are our unit pools and OpenMe files. You don't need to worry about playing with core and functions. So we've got our Init.sqf, which has brackets execVM EOS /OpenMe.sqf, and we have saved that. And now what we can do is go back to the editor. Actually, just 2 seconds. OpenMe, and we have Vietnamese spawn zones marker Z1. Okay, I need to remember that. Now I've put a marker down here on the map, and if you don't know how to put the markers down, just simply go up to markers, and these are your normal markers. Just go over to areas, and you can select an ellipse or a rectangle, it doesn't matter. You can place it on the map, and if you left click and hold left click, you can actually change the size, but I'm just going to have it about yay big. If you want to know exactly how big it is, or you want an exact size, you can double click on it and you can change the size in here. And I'll just change that to a 50 by 50. Okay, now you'll see here it's solid and you can see it on the map, but because we've changed the marker type number, you won't be able to see it. Okay, and remember, when we're within 20 meters of this marker, our enemy will spawn. The other thing you need to have on the map is a game logic. So we get those by going to systems, and that's where you would normally display when you open that. Just go across to this one, to logic entities, click game logic, place it on the map, double left click, and change the variable name, or enter the variable name for that to server, and click OK. So provided you have all that in place, this zone will now spawn a bunch of enemy when I'm within 20 meters of that area. Now, because I don't want to die immediately, I'm just going to go and change the special states to turn damage off, so they could shoot me all they like and I won't die. So let's now see how that works. One thing I skipped over that I should have mentioned is, remember in our EOS we have the spawn zone is Z1. We need to remember to double click the marker and change the variable name to match the spawn zone name in the script. So Z_1. Okay. So now let's have a look and see what it does. So the ideal way to use these spawn zones is to not make them so small. If we click on one here and hit the spacebar 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're then able to move and drag this zone around. Now that's quite a big zone, which means you won't get all those enemies spawning in a small area. They're actually quite spread out. Okay, so remember, when I get within 20 meters of that zone, the enemy will start to spawn. So I'll show you how we apply this to a mission. Let me just move the camera. So I'm part of a group, although there's just one of me, and I know that I need to patrol from this location up to this crossroad here as part of some sort of mission scenario. Now your players can't see that zone. They don't know that it's there. And what I'm going to do is go into the zone and change it from 20 meters spawn distance to the zone to 200 meters. Okay, so now when my player is within 200 meters of that zone, those enemy will begin to spawn in that area. And I'll make the rectangle a little bit bigger, and I'll move myself a little bit further back. Okay, so now we'll play it in single player, although I would normally play it in multiplayer because I don't make single player missions. And I've been tasked to patrol from this crossroad here up to another crossroad to the northwest. Now I haven't placed enemy AI units down. Your guys won't know where the enemy are going to spawn from. And I know because of the zone number that I've placed. As the mission maker, your players, once they're on the ground and patrolling, when they are within 200 meters of that zone, the enemy will spawn in. And having a zone set up in that way, which is larger, with a greater distance, adds a little more realism. You won't see them all just magically appear in front of you. They will appear more naturally. Okay, I can already hear a vehicle. I don't know what that vehicle is if I'm a player that hasn't made the mission, so I'm now going to become a little more cautious. Oh, and I can see an enemy troop off in the distance. And you see what I mean by more natural? If the spawn zone's bigger and you set the distance a little bit higher, I wouldn't recommend going to distances like anything over 400, because then you're probably going to get too much of an AI load. So these guys, they're quite a distance from me. They're probably at least 300 meters from me. And they're patrolling down there across the road. And then your troops can make the decision whether they're going to engage those troops. Once they've spawned, they will patrol. They won't just stand there. So you always make a decision whether they're going to engage or whether they're just going to let them pass. And keep in mind that anywhere within that area, even outside that zone within this area, they will continue to patrol around, provided you are within 200 meters of that zone. And again, you can't see the zone on the map, so your players won't know where these zones are, and it adds a lot more immersion, and it assists with server load. Okay, so we're in the mission, and if you have a look at the map, you'll see that you can't see the enemy marker, the enemy spawn zone. So you can imagine you place these all over the place, and your players won't know where the spawn zones are. Now remember, I set this up so that they would spawn if I was within 20 meters of the marker. So I'm patrolling along, and the spawn zone is, I'm guessing, probably about 60 meters from where I spawned in. And when I'm within 20 meters of it, those units will spawn in. And we will get there eventually. Oh, there they are. Now if I back away, they despawn. So that 20 meter distance from the marker, if you enter that 20 meters, the enemy will spawn. If you move out, they will despawn. This saves you an awful load of headaches when it comes to AI load. And again, I move into that zone, and here they are. Bad guys everywhere. I'm moving out of the zone, and they've all despawned. So you can have small zones with small units spawning everywhere all over the place, and then when your units move away from them, they will disappear to save the server load. So just a really quick recap. Grab the EOS from the Bohemia Interactive forums. I will place the link in the description. Open the editor, place down a unit, save your mission. That will give you a mission file within your documents, Arma 3, other profiles, playing name, MP missions. Inside that you need to place the EOS folder. You need to have the Init.sqf, which has brackets, execVM, and in inverted commas, EOS \OpenMe.sqf in inverted commas with a semicolon to close. Inside the EOS folder, you'll have the unit pools, and I explained how it was that we got our our class names for the different troops and the faction number there. Just to give you an example of how the factions work, I will now show you. So for example, faction 0 is the NVA, faction 1 is independent, so troops that are not necessarily friendly to either side. And I'll show you how that works, just to show you that the faction name or the faction number in the lines of code in the OpenMe.sqf do matter. So here we've got our independent zones, and we have faction 1 is independent. No, we're actually going to use faction 2. Faction 2 is independent because I think I've doubled up. Yep, faction 2, that's fine. So we'll just use faction 2, and in the OpenMe we'll use spawn zone B_1, which has, again, house groups, patrol groups, light vehicles, static vehicles, armored vehicles, helicopters, and then the faction, the marker type, distance to spawn, the faction name, true is the height limiter, and false we leave because that's debug, and then call EOS spawn. So B_1. So we'll change the number or the variable name from Z1, which is North Vietnamese, to B1. Okay, and I'll move that a little closer. We should get exactly the same result. However, this time, instead of North Vietnamese army spawning, because they're faction 0, we should now have independent troops spawning, because they're a different faction number. I think I used 1. And there we go. Independent faction has spawned. And remember I said the numbers of units spawned correlate directly to the numbers in the example on the unit pools file. So we've got quite a few independent troops that have spawned there. Alright, so we have asked for 3 patrol groups. Now 3 equals 8 to 12, and we have asked for 3 groups. Let me see, independent B1, so 3 groups of 5. So 5 is 16 to 20. So 3 groups of 16 to 20 troops have spawned, which is quite a lot. And because these are independent, they are on our side, they won't attack us. Okay, so that's quite a lot of them. I'd recommend probably, if you can have this many troops spawn as enemy troops or independent or whatever you like, if you're going to have a lot, then have that zone a fair distance from your other zones, because you don't want a bunch of zones kicking off at the same time and spawning way too many AI for your mission. Okay. So, I hope I have not confused you with the use of EOS. It is absolutely brilliant. I use it pretty much in all of my missions. Another trick you can use is to copy those zones and then paste them, and you'll see it automatically changes the variable name to B_2, because I've copied B_1, which again correlates directly to the names of my zones. You'll see I have B1, B2, etc. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer them. This is quite more detailed than the usual stuff I do, but I did have a request to explain how it works and how to make it work in a mission. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you guys. Give us a like, a share, and a subscribe.